Beena. Love that. Wow, wow. I'm still digesting. And you Erica? I'm still digesting here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hmm. How do you feel on the application of capital H hearing for you? How has it shifted for you? Especially in the context now of what Beena is sharing.
Oh, me?
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
I think just like with everything else that I've been trying to practice lately, it's something that takes constant sort of deliberate adjustment, because it's, I mean, hearing, for those of us who are able to hear, is something we've been doing for literally our entire lives. And so it's absolutely a habit to hear, lowercase here. So to really be adjusting the way that you're hearing and the application of hearing, that's something that would, for me, take constant focus and sort of deliberate attention, to really successfully apply that. But I think that's certainly a worthy cause, because I mean, I really do think there's many different ways to hear. And if not, if we're not really hearing, we miss a lot of things. There's a lot of innuendo, nuance to things people are saying, or things that um, they are trying to say, but maybe it's not coming out. And if you're really, really hearing, capital H hearing, you can pick up on those things and, you know, kind of grab the intent behind things that you would normally miss if you're thinking about what you're going to say instead of hearing. Or like Beena was saying, I mean, if you're not assuming that what they're saying makes sense right off the bat, there are a lot of finer things that you're probably missing out of that conversation.
Beena? I want to hear more, Beena. I want to hear more. Especially about how you constantly put it into practice. Like that kind of an overbending. Yes, I'm keen to hear more on that.
Like this is Sue asked me that, okay, what is capital H hearing and how you acquire this? So for me, the answer was simple, that it is by practicing way of impeccability, power turns, and by applying it. And I think that it happens when you uh, continuously, regularly apply these ideas in your life, in general life. It becomes your innate intent that, okay, how things work, this is how things work. So yes, the platform is huge that I can practice daily. It is something beyond my expectation, that how much I have learned from this through Zoom sessions, through you guys, but in general life also, in my daily life also. My friends are saying that how they are feeling heard when they talk to me now.
I'll be there.
And my family also, they feel that yes, I have more patience, I have um, more receptivity in general, because they feel heard, that yes, I'm understanding what they are saying. It's not about agreeing or disagree. Yeah, I can disagree with anyone on anything, with the complete understanding of what they are saying.
Yes, that's a huge point. That is a big deal. What you are saying. That I feel, Beena, is from when I hear you, and the magic of what I enjoy from you is that you are unhooked from this agree disagree, that you are looking to see the sense of things, and it's capital M makes sense, that capital S sense, that huge overview sense, that trust that there is a sense to things. It's a profound thing. It's really magical to me how you listen to understanding, listen to seeing the sense that you've assumed to be there. You have shifted the entire paradigm of what's going on in order to practice this capital H hearing. Yes.
Yes, but okay, I think now it's already 8:30. We can carry on with the modules.
All right, all right, all right. Yes, Beena's a good timekeeper. I love it. It's such a huge point, you know. But yes, thank you, Beena. Thank you. Wow, I want to hear more, Beena. I want to hear more. I just love this. It's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. All right, we'll revisit it again. We'll revisit it again.
Yes.
We'll let it digest and stew a little bit. And yeah, right, Erica, we'll kind of let it filter in. There's a lot. There's a lot in this. Yeah, capital H hearing is a big deal for me too. You know, it's something I make every effort every day, like Beena, that really practice, practice, practice. And this, I would say, for me personally, Beena, to share on this, that you know, it's something that I don't feel like I sort of ever really fully acquire. I keep adding to it. I keep looking to more, and it's a constant effort to practice this. Constant, constant. Yeah, constant deliberation to do so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Try, Beena. Try.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's hear from Erica Jayne. You're gonna be under the microscope with
You,
hearing today.
you're mute. You're mute, Erica.
Yeah.
You're mute.
On mute. Gotcha. Okay, so module 8 session 2 was what I went through last night, which is attunement, alignment, and anomalies. And so I most of the notes that I took were dictionary of power entries and really adding these entries again with all of the deeper definitions that came through in the session. One of the sort of questions I had or things that I'm still working through was on the application of attunement. The application of alignment and anomalies made a lot of sense to me, but I wanted to go through sort of practical application of attunement. And this was a pretty short session. It was really pretty succinct, you know, right into what each of these three things meant. So I thought we could do something different today and go through the slides together of these three and just kind of see what comes up in conversation as we're going through those. So, and by the way, the content from the session yesterday has been just absolutely rolling around in my mind. I was talking with my mom about it last night because I think that session in particular is something that really correlates to where she's at right now. And we talked a lot about, I think she said the other day that she keeps getting this question presented to her like everywhere she looks of what do you want, and has been feeling all this pressure to like have an answer to that question and know what it is that she wants, and she's frustrated because she doesn't know. And we were talking about it in terms of intent, which I think you and her were talking about that the other day. So but that takes on a whole different meaning when you're thinking about it from intent, and it's not really something that's meant to be answered right away. It's something that you have to kind of spend some time on. So we had a really interesting conversation about that, and I'm still just thinking through all of that stuff from the session yesterday. So that's remaining right at the front of my mind at this point. So
Fantastic. Let me ask you, in terms of, it's not an obvious thing to come from the session, but sometimes when we ask a question, then it becomes, oh, do you feel if I ask you that the session on attunement is somewhat incomplete.
Mm. So yes, from the perspective of, like I said, I think the definition of attunement, this is what it is,
Yes.
it was really clear, but that is it's like an abstract concept. It's not a super concrete, like this is exactly what to do. And so for me, I was trying to, while I was going through the session, I was like trying to think of, okay, what are some examples of like how I would actually do this? And so, the other two, I definitely, that they're not quite as abstract of a concept.
Gotcha. Okay, so this particular session, it's a difficult one to put up on, because it is mm, there's a vagueness to it in one
Mhm.
aspect, and it's difficult to concretize it because I'm afraid that a clearer definition might be limiting. So
Interesting.
that's, yeah. So like you can say it clearly, but because attunement is so big, I was careful to avoid this of
Right.
creating a perception. So there's a deliberateness in this to leave it
Mhm.
open, and for it to be of all the particular sessions, this one is the one that is most needed in depth in Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fantastic that you say, oh, let's go over the slides.
Mhm.
This is absolutely appropriate. Yes, it is really, really, really huge to do this. It's absolutely necessary. It's a very, very big deal. All right, so here we go. Module 8, session 2. Beena had to go, unfortunately, so
Oh, okay.
hopefully she'll be able to come back. Yeah, yeah. So, do you want to read the story again, or do the whole thing, or pick up from after the story, or not? It's up to
Um,
you.
let's see.
I'm screen sharing. Yes, I don't know if you.
Yes, I've got it up here. Um, yeah, I think we could go through the story
Oh, okay,
quickly.
good, because I love the story. I don't know if you've read the whole story, by the way. There's more to this story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a little extra part to it that I didn't put in because it was, because there's what happened after that, and a little bit more. It's a the more personal aspect of it. This is more, universal. It's an
Right.
abstract. So, but it blends over. But yeah, there's more. I'll share it with you. I'll send you the link.
Awesome.
All right. So one day in a faraway land, a young man said to his heart, I have tried mightily to learn. One second. To acquire wisdom. After all my studies of scriptures, texts, philosophies, and more, I have not found an answer. His heart asked sweetly, to what question? He pondered this as he had been, wanting to express himself clearly. This was dear to his soul. I want to live right. I want to be sure I am making good decisions. But all the learning in the world cannot ensure my choices are appropriate. In the short term, they seem fine. Longer term, it is hard to know. The same with context. I have come to understand clearly my knowledge is limited and will always be limited. He considered his own words carefully. It is this limitation of knowledge which concerns me. Knowledge is not information, and neither of these are wisdom. The dream of self wisdom is flawed. Now, right there for me, the story takes a huge jump,
Right.
that the dream of self wisdom is flawed. This is not connected. It is connected because, yes, wisdom and this, but there's an inference here, that one has to kind of jump with this, right? So that's what we're going to read this, not for that. We're going to just stop as needed. Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, this is the intent, that we are going to dissect as we go along, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
this is absolutely very essential here in this point, to say, wait a second, to understand that this point that the young man is making here about the dream of self wisdom being flawed.
Hmm.
This is not a simple point. So I would say the inference here is, and again, I'm coming at this, I'm stepping outside of it, because this story is so huge for me that I have to basically come at this as if, and I am. For me, I'm actually working this out from scratch now. You know,
Yeah.
there's not a memory thing here, because I know what it means, but I didn't articulate it here necessarily. So I
Right.
am now. So this dream of self-wisdom, it is the pursuit to say that we can essentially be in charge of ourselves and how we interact in the world, and that we can be completely competent and efficient and functional, and basically have it all together and be the ideal of what you want to be. So learning in this point of wisdom, it is saying that if we acquire wisdom for ourselves, right, by ourselves, even from ourselves, we acquire this capacity to have wisdom,
Right.
not necessarily be wise, but to have wisdom is slightly different. Okay, maybe to be wise also, but this is the goal of it, is to enable us to be able to act and be able to do without doubt, right?
Okay.
In its ultimate, this would be to get to a point of where we have confidence, because we've learned, we've acquired knowledge and wisdom, right? Not just ordinary regular knowledge, but wisdom specifically, right? And to understand that knowledge is not information, and neither of these are wisdom. I understand the differences. Okay, so we get knowledge and wisdom
Right.
both together. And this, we hope, is going to make us and get us to a situation where we now know what's going on. We know how to behave. We know how to do. We know how to
Right.
act. We know how to think, etc. And that is not enough.
Hmm.
That's where the flaw is. It's the assumption that it will be enough. It's not. So take all of way of impeccability up until this session, everything
Mm.
prior to now. There could be an assumption that this is going to be enough to get us to be okay in the world. Now,
Right.
yes, way of impeccability, it's somewhat, by implication, postulates this as an agenda, or as something that is so. And yes, it is to a large extent true, but not completely so. It does enable us to pretty much deal with any situation, but not all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. In general, yes. Mostly, yes, but not all. And it is that difference, that gap,
Right.
whether
Right.
it be 5%, 1%, 50, doesn't matter. Whatever that gap is, this is the gap that we now are saying this is the flaw. We are
Yeah.
looking to fill that gap, right? Right.
Right. That
Now,
makes
by rights to me, and what I was saying earlier to you, this session is by weight, it is the equivalent of everything else. In terms of, like, you could say, okay, we could leave out maybe self-quoting, and not going to make all that much difference to the
right.
call.
Right.
But without this attunement, there is a problem.
Right.
There is a problem. All right, and this is that dream of self-wisdom, to
Mm.
say, without this, what we are going to be talking about, we are looking to fix the flaw in self-wisdom.
Right.
Not
Okay.
that it is in its entirety. Our
Right.
self-wisdom in the conventionality needs an addition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That makes
Right,
sense.
right.
Yeah.
In the usual say, okay, we are going to learn to be wise, and that's enough. No, not
Right.
enough. Not enough, because attunement is not part of the usual wisdom logic.
Right. Right.
It's not. It's not knowledge, and it does not there. It is an alien concept. And in terms of all my studies of my great reading project, I think I mentioned it. The chronological reading thing. Of Did I ever mention it? No.
I think so.
Oh, wow. Oh, then I need to put this in context. I kind of assumed that story was already there. Uh, so, I was always hell bent on learning, growing like Beena,
Mm-hmm.
wanting knowledge, um, and so from age 10, perfection. The story started with the thing with perfection. And I said, oh, I want perfection according to my definition. Well, first I defined perfection, as, and then said, this was my pursuit. It was the pursuit of getting to what would be perfect for me. And I said, well, for that, I need awareness. And then I got into awareness, and then from there, all of these things. Okay. Um, but now, as I'm going along with this, I'm reading a lot, doing everything. And in my reading, I read stories, a lot of them. And, I just love reading stories. And then said in the stories, like I remember reading Herman Hesse,
Mm.
and I was starting to get into that type of, I guess literary fiction, I guess, so I loved Herman Hesse, but Herman Hesse said he kept talking about Nietzsche. I was like, who the hell is this blaming
Mm.
Nietzsche now?
Yeah,
Because I'm completely in a very conservative community. I'm the only
right.
one that I know that's really reading and so on. So I go look up who Nietzsche is. I read a bit of Nietzsche. Nietzsche keeps referring to Schopenhauer. Bloody hell, who the hell is Schopenhauer now? And Schopenhauer refers to Kant, and so it went around and around.
Right.
So sometimes I would, like the Greeks. A lot of them referred to the Greeks. I knew some of the Greek stuff
Mhm.
a little bit, but it just bugged me. I said I didn't want to be chasing tails here. I didn't want to be spinning this.
Right.
So I said, let me just resolve this for all, because I want to know who they're referring to. And I said, okay, well, let me just read it all in chronological order. So
Mhm.
I'm, I make it sound so simple, but it was a big thing, obviously.
I can imagine.
So I said, I want to read all of these, the great works in literature, religion, philosophy, economics, I don't know, whatever it was, anything that was considered a classic or a great work, I want to
Right.
read them, but I want to read them in chronological order so that I can see the references, and then I'll know where it is, and I
Right.
won't have to keep
Right.
going back to it. So, it took me quite a while to make those lists, because this is
Mm.
pre-internet days. So, this is all manual research to do this. So this was quite the job. Took
Yeah.
me a long time to do that, and then I had to acquire the books too, because I wanted them to be my own, not not
Mhm.
not library books. So that was a big job, just from a cost point of view, but actually finding them was a big deal too. So I didn't quite get everything on the list, but I got the bulk of it. So the overwhelming bulk, so it was okay. A few missed there, but it's all right. Didn't matter. And then I said about reading them. And so this was a big deal to see this. And, might as well finish the whole story now. So what was cool about this is that when I started reading, I saw the pattern development of logic, and the
Interesting.
pattern development of not just logic, but of problem and resolution. You
Right.
can see this in the Bible. If you ever read the Bible as a book, you
Yeah.
see that they postulate the problem. Okay, look at Job. Job comes about because essentially the people are looking around and saying, yeah, but the sinners are getting away with murder over here. It's like, what the
Mhm.
hell is up with this? Why do I need to be good? Right? And the end of the result of Job is a horrible answer. Well, I mean, the answer that God gives Job is, well, because I'm God. This is it,
Mhm.
Okay. So essentially, you're saying, well, if you got the power, you can do whatever you like. So hey, you better listen to
Yeah.
me, right? It
Yes.
is that the narcissism ideal, the
Right.
BMN ideal. Just because I want to, it's right. That's it,
Mhm.
which is a horrible answer, of course.
Yes.
So this doesn't last very long. If you look at the books that come after this, people lose faith as a result of this. And then, those last books in the New Testament, that's all about, oh, you're a stiff-necked people and woe be unto you, you're going to come short, basically, because you're not paying attention. You're going to suffer. And nobody listens to the prophets. They don't care. And then Jesus comes along and introduces the concept of afterlife,
Mhm.
which is like, now we get why we need to suffer here, because otherwise
Right.
you, and now there's a logic to it. So, I mean, those are very basic. There's more nuanced ones coming up, but it's a very simple progression, to say, okay, how this works, that you need to suffer for, and you need to, pay attention now for later.
Yeah.
So there's still problems to that, of course, but
Right.
now you see that thought progression in
Right.
in the Bible, because the Bible takes place over a long period of time. But you also see it in literature, philosophy, art in general. It comes, and then somebody comes, and there's a revolution, and then it kind of gets accepted, and then so
Right.
you see the evolution of thought and of
Right.
morality, of thinking, of philosophy, and all of this. It's very powerful to see it that way.
Yeah.
And also, though, in this, because I'm coming at it from a different angle, I didn't come at that reading project. Yes, my original intent was to know the references, but my bigger intent was always about learning and growth. So
Mm.
I never read to remember what somebody's saying. I came across something that was interesting to me. I would stop and listen, figure it out, say, think it through to the end.
Right.
Only when I could sign off on it did I continue. Whether I agreed or not, as Beena said, no, I came to understanding. Okay, I understand, I get it. I can work it out. I can put the logical connection to it together, and there you go. So when I could do that, then I could say, okay, this is something that I'm going to take on. And I couldn't care two hoots if it made sense or not. If I couldn't use it, didn't matter to me.
Right.
So
Right.
so I did find that. So I read with my trusty red pen. I love those red pens. They were see-through big pens with a thick nib. And I don't find them anymore because you can't underline in a book with a fine point. It needs to be a thick point. Yeah.
Right.
So very important. Otherwise you tear the page, So anyway, I love those pens. I would underline, but I was very disappointed. I had bought these big notebooks. They were huge, as long as my forearm about, and they had thick kind of black kind of paper mache covers to them. I don't
Oh,
think they make them anymore, but what's that?
oh no, I was just saying, oh
Oh,
yeah.
I thought maybe you recognize them. Anyway, so I especially acquired these notebooks thinking that whatever I underline, and in the beginning I did this, I was going to extract and put in my notebook for
Right.
coming back to it later, because I know that you recognize something and you see its profoundness, but it goes fairly quickly. So you have to come back to it, and
Right.
then you have to insist on it, and you have to apply it. You have to go over until it gets ingrained and it becomes innate. So, set aside my notebook for this purpose. Very little went into that notebook.
Interesting.
It was most disappointing.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't quite click why initially. Okay, I read a lot of the Buddhist stuff, and because I'm reading in chronological order now, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, there's stuff like the Dhammapada and the Bhagavad Gita, and there's a whole bunch of them that are really cool scriptures, and they have a lot of power in them. But I found it hard to use
Interesting.
because the language was poor in
Huh.
the way of its expression. It,
Yeah.
it was a language with a psychology and an underlying understanding and intent that was from another time. And
Interesting.
I saw that how they are coming this lacked a certainness to it.
Mm.
And yes, there's much in it, but there was a sophistication that was lacking. And I knew this, so it bothered me. So very little of that went into the books. And of course, the same thing with the Bible. Yes, there's good things, but some of the stuff that is valuable in there, it's like, well, duh. So
Right.
it didn't go into my notebook. I'm not
Right.
going to put in there what is a duh to me. The point in the notebook was for purposes of application.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. I wanted to see what I needed to learn to apply. So if I'm already doing it and I didn't put it. So
Right.
as I went through, it became less and less. And then there were a few bright sparks that stood out for me. Like I loved Plato and Socrates, the
Mm-hmm.
Socratic dialogues. They were very unique. And in all of that reading, I've never ever encountered anything that is similar to them, which
Interesting.
surprised me. You would think
Yeah.
it's such a profound mechanism. You would
Mm-hmm.
think more people would do it. I mean, it was very cool as a story, but I never ever saw anybody do it. It's fascinating to me. So I just love that. But again, to use that, essentially what he's doing is exposing bullshitters and BMNs.
Right.
You
Right.
know, okay, it's good to do and it seems clever, but I still thought at the time, all right, is this something you want to go around doing?
Right.
No, not really. There's not really much of a value to it. So as cool as it was, not much of a value to it in practical application. So, and I'd already formulated kind of different perspectives on things. Because by the time I got to do this reading project, by the time I made the lists and acquired the books, because I had to wait until I acquired them all before I
Right.
started reading,
Right.
because I didn't acquire them in order. They just kind of came about randomly, so I had to wait. So this was after school. When did I start? I don't know, but it was way after school, university or even during the army. So I went to university for a year, and there was 2 years before I went, because was 1 year, then a half a year and a half before I went to the army for 2 years conscription. Like those
Mm.
forced things.
Right. Right.
So there's quite a lot of time in that space. And then I know I was still busy on the project when I finished the army. So I'm not sure when I started. I may have started during the army. I don't remember. Yeah, actually, I think I did now that I come to think of it. I did start during the army, yeah. So, it's in that time period for me is a long time after school.
Yeah.
Because very intense stuff, stuff happens a long time.
Right.
Anyway, so I finished sometime after that. So I guess by the time I really finished it, I'm probably about in my mid to early 20s, like 22, 23, 24, somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly. At any rate, this was disappointing for me. Now, again, Nietzsche was a bright spot. I love Nietzsche, and to this day, the most fantastic English prose I've read is Nietzsche.
Interesting.
There were other few that stuck out here and there, but in terms of usability, I didn't find this. Now,
Mhm.
so I'm reading this and I'm kind of getting a bit depressed on this because I'm getting to the 1800s already now, and I'm reading Balzac and Tolstoy and Dostoevsky.
Right.
And, oh my God, I'm getting depressed because you've read some of them a little bit, I'm assuming, yes,
I'm sure,
or at
yeah.
least you're more or less familiar with the stories, but they are horribly negative. And
Mhm.
oh my God, like Dostoevsky, and they're just focusing on the downsides of life. There's not, and I said, man, I don't want to be hearing this stuff. There's no value in this whatsoever.
Right, right.
But I'm sticking it out. I'm reading, and some of the philosophers too, a little earlier than that, like Kant, Berkeley, Locke, and Hume. I remember
Mm.
those four still because they're all English philosophers. Well, Kant is German, but the other three are English. Anyway, they all kind of go. They are mind-numbingly, horribly, just
Wow.
atrociously difficult to read. I was like, come on, there's no value here. They're the guys who gave philosophy a bad name, getting all super technical and theoretical.
Right.
No practical application. Now, yes, they did bring some important concepts into being, but still, it's like, man. Anyway, so I'm getting a bit depressed. So as I'm reading, and this is a long period of time because it pretty much, there's a lot of books involved. So this is probably
Right.
over the space of a year or two that I'm reading, and I'm not really, well, the whole project, I'm not getting what I want out of it.
Right.
So I realize now that in this disappointment, I had set an intent.
Mm.
And the intent was to get practical value
Mhm.
and applicability. And so as I'm reading, I come to an author, and this author was pointed out as an anomaly when I was making a reading list at school. There was a guy in class, and he was kind of a little older, even though he was in the same grade as I was. And he read, this is in the last school I was, not the one where I started reading when I was reading
Mm.
Nietzsche. Which is basically Beverly Hills 90210. That school I went for the last 2 years.
Mhm.
So I asked him for a recommendation. I asked the English teacher too, and he pointed out this author, and he said, but you must read them in order. It's very important because it's a whole book series. He said, you
Right.
must read it in order. Very, very important. And he emphasized this again, and it was anomalous to me at the time. So when I came to it, I remember this. It was kind of pointed out. I said, ah. So anyway, when I got to this particular author, I found then my red pen worked overtime.
Mm.
This was cool. But yeah, and then the same thing happened with Nietzsche a little bit. There was a lot that I underlined in Nietzsche. But what it was more in Nietzsche, it was about recognition.
Hmm.
And this really shifted things for me. Nietzsche really scared me at the one point. I said,
Interesting.
bloody hell. I read a sentence which I had literally come to like the week before in
Uh-huh.
the same exact words. I thought it through, I'd worked it out, and I came to, and I'm like, but bloody hell, how is this possible for these words to be? And I felt like somehow they'd been stolen out of my mind. It was
Right.
quite,
Right.
it was quite a profound thing because it wasn't a coincidentalness of the words. It was the understanding, the logic, and that.
Mhm.
And then I kind of realized that with Nietzsche already. Now, by the time I got to, well, the author is Castaneda. And by the time I got to Castaneda, in between Nietzsche and Castaneda was all that negative. I had come to realize that moment when I saw that in Nietzsche, I came to realize that I am being disappointed because I'd actually created my own philosophy
Hmm.
already. Yeah. And this is what I've been doing all my life since age
Right.
10, but
Right.
of course you don't think it of yourself at the time.
Right.
So when I came to Castaneda, I recognized what I'd done all my life, and here it was written. I kind of felt like I'd written that book, that
Mhm.
series. So Nietzsche, not so much because he gets a bit flowery, and he's
Mm.
got a bit of a BMN mindset. He's like kind of looking to stick it to the intellectuals, and so
Interesting.
okay, he says a lot of stuff, but he mocks them inadvertently in a way. He's really he does the same thing that Plato and Socrates did. He has kind of a beef with these
Right.
pseudo
Right.
intellectuals and people hyping on BMNs and all this stuff. So, but then when I got to Carlos, well, Don Juan is the character Don Juan,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is meant to be real or not, doesn't matter. I never cared whether he was real or not, made no difference to me. I could never understand why this was an issue to people. If what the character is saying and is fictional, if what the character says is valuable, who cares?
Right.
You know,
Right.
it doesn't matter. So anyway, people made a big fuss of this. I couldn't care two weeks about it. So anyway, so So then that I felt like I'd read that, and then that I made a big study of that, because everything that I had been working on all my life, here I saw it and articulated in language that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
So many concepts from there come, and of course impeccability is something that, yes, this has always been my focus and
Mm-hmm.
awareness. So I saw them actually articulated in usable ways. So I made a big study of that big project, pulled all the quotes, rearranged them, put them into a spreadsheet, tagged them. This is way
Mm-hmm.
before tags were even a thing,
Right.
in separate columns, rearranged the spreadsheet into chronologically sorted
Right.
by category, so on and so forth. So big, big project. Spent many years working on that. Very powerful. And then, of course, I said, well, now it's time to apply. So I
Right.
stopped reading. That was it. I said, okay, I've done it now. I know what I want to do. And so, what's the point of reading further? Then I started just reading I still enjoy reading. I just
Right.
read science fiction and fantasy, because science fiction and fantasy is applied philosophy for the most part. Especially science fiction. You're
Right.
putting a particular philosophy into application.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. And a lot of science fiction has that, like Dune. And Frank Herbert said too, he said, you don't want to be preaching, you want to be showing, you want to be demonstrating.
I like
So
that.
yeah. So there's a lots of philosophy behind what they're doing, but it's subtle, and it's in application. So anyway, so I'm going on, and now I said, in terms of self-help, studying like that, I definitively and decidedly said, I can't be looking more, because I'm going to get stuck in this loop of searching. At some
Right.
point, you've got to get to application.
Right.
And so I said, now I know what I want to do. I want to apply this. And from then on, I started to really just shift into full application mode,
Mm-hmm.
because I had seen a proof that what I'd done all my life, through all, from age 10, especially in my teenage years, I really formulated and thought things through, and I had constructed this philosophy, which now I saw represented in this book. I
Mm-hmm.
really felt like, in some weird different, I still feel that in some weird alternative universe, I could have written that story, but
Right.
I
Right.
wouldn't have written it in exactly the same way now, because the character Carlos in the book, I mean, he's not a character he's writing. Oh, he used to irritate the hell out of me. Everybody always wanted to be Carlos and say, oh, I wish I was. No, 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 no. I never ever wanted to be Carlos. Never. I
Yes.
said, no, I want to be Don Juan. How the hell can you want to be Carlos?
Right.
I always identified with Don Juan, not with Carlos. But anyway, it's a fascinating to me how people identify like that. Anyway, so this then it shifted to this application, and this is a very big point. And in
Mm-hmm.
this, I'm not sure why I mentioned the story in the first place, why this all came about. But in the Carlos stuff, yes, Don Juan talks a lot about impeccability. He doesn't define impeccability as much
Right.
as I would like. His style is a bit sparse for my liking, and I like to go a little bit deeper to him. I mean, the only definition he gives of impeccability is that it's the best use of energy. That's his only definition ever. So I felt there was more. There was more to this, and particularly I recognized things that I thought about in great detail, and I saw an element of it, a touch, But the language was cool, so lots of nice stuff in the language, and lots of nice way of thinking about it. And Don Juan, he never uses the word attunement or anything similar.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, what attunement is that we are talking about, it's a bit of a vague and a nebulous thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's there, but it's not addressed really. And Carlos completely misses the boat when it comes to attunement,
Mm-hmm.
because of this lack of defined articulation on it. And it's not an easy topic to articulate, but it can be. But
Right.
we need to do it in a pertinence and relevance, because it's broad, and attunement is going to mean different things for different people.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why I think I'm making the story. I think there was some other reason for it also, which I now lost the original point. It's okay. Um, just to bring it back to attunement, to say that, when we are looking at this point of attunement, it is an overall cohesiveness that we need to have, and
Right.
and I have a depth of conception to it. So let me see where I was here. The dream of self wisdom, and yes, that was a big part of. Well, Don Juan said something which for me kind of solidified this point for me in terms of application. He said that unless a warrior gets an omen, he has no way of knowing how to proceed.
Hmm. It's
That's it.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting quote. And I you know, I can't remember the quotes just offhand. Like I can't like spew 20 quotes, but
Right,
when it's applicable, then sometimes I can remember the exact words. Because few things they really stuck with me, because it was anomalous to me,
hmm
right? It's like, wow, that's a very powerful thing to say. You say a lot of things which make sense, and this is what I liked about Don Juan. It's not what he said made sense to me in how it sounded or looked. It was recognition. I'd worked these points out myself
right.
beforehand, and here's somebody simply expressing what I'd already spent huge
hmm
amounts of work in. So I'm recognizing its validity. So
hmm
90% of what he says outside of the sphere where he's dealing with power plants. That stuff I just disregarded completely because I have no knowledge of it, no experience of it, and I didn't really want to know anything about it
Right.
either. And then later, in the later books, it comes out and he says to Carlos, well, the only reason we did the power plants is because you're an idiot. He says it to him because you didn't get it. We had to shake you out of your idiocy. He says it like that to him as well. He said, you know, you were so locked into your beliefs and misbeliefs and, you know, your bubble that you were in. We had to break the bubble. So he said, you know, sensible people, most people don't need these power plants to shift you out of it. But, you know,
Mhm.
you needed it. So the whole, but I'm just, the books were very popular because they came out in the late 60s, you know, in the drug era time, and they got a
Right,
big
right.
popularity because of peyote and mushrooms and all of this stuff. It all started from him pretty much, you know. At least he really, that's what made the books popular and further popularized that
hmm
aspect of, you know, spiritual drug use. Because,
Right,
you know, and in the early days of the 60s, the drug use was all recreational, you know, and then people got criticized and said, oh, and then they transferred it into spiritual, and then it sort of made it
right,
okay.
right.
So he legitimized the spiritual usage of it. But so I just took all of what he said. And when I saw that, oh, it's making sense because I've proved it to myself and stuff I've worked out myself, I'm recognizing it. But then I came to the anomalies of things that, oh, like when he said that a warrior has no way of proceeding unless they get an omen. Right?
hmm
It's like, wow, that's a very implicative statement right there. And he's saying that he needs to know in terms of this, he needs attunement in. And this is, you know,
Right.
attunement came, the word came later than that actually, but in the concept for me, this is what it was. Because
Yeah.
I actually actively searched for a term to put together this cohesive
hmm
understanding of his, and he's living in connectivity to the universe and the world. Now he doesn't
Right.
use the word attunement, and again, there's lots of parts of Don Juan where you have to go more, and Don Juan says it too. He says that you have to take stuff like this and you have to push it further. You have to go further and go more. Yeah. So anyway, so this was a big point, and I wish I knew why I started the story now, but I don't know. There was a reason for it. Why I had to say about the reading project.
Well,
Uh,
we were talking about the gap. The self-wisdom is flawed. You're never going to know everything. There's always a gap.
Oh, that's right. So, because I had at this point of writing the story, this is after Carlos. This comes to be at the point where we are shifting the way of living. So the
Mhm.
young man is saying that, look, I have read all these books. I have made all this study. I have come to a point in the usual sense of things where I've acquired some knowledge and at least an understanding, where I've been entrenched in wisdom. Now, okay, he's still a young man and he was humble at the point too. But he says, realistically, I can say that I've really made an effort for this because it's not like I've just been reading this, you know, lately. It's been my entire life that I've been dealing with this.
Right.
So I see it like when I read Carlos, I'm recognizing the validity of all my efforts prior to
Mhm.
that, right? Because I've worked the stuff out, and yeah, it's being articulated by somebody else in a cohesive system, right?
Right.
And I always wanted that. I wanted a cohesive system, and yes, Don Juan's overall system is cohesive, but it was missing things like this concept of attunement. It really missed it, even though it was inferred and implied in many
Right.
ways, but it
Right.
didn't have it as a clear thing. So I was at a point where I said, it's flawed for me because there's stuff missing. You know, I
Right.
can't trust
Right.
on this because I cannot trust. I cannot
Mhm.
really trust my own knowledge because I don't have total information. I don't have this
Right.
information.
Right.
So this is where the story picks up to say. And again, the point of the reading story was that it wasn't an idly come by idea,
Mm-hmm.
concept. It was based on a very real,
Right.
in-depth, search and study and
Right.
application.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not an idle point. All right. His heart understood. She always understood. She waited, keen to hear more. Dreams were delicate, especially when they transitioned. New dreams required tender care. Each was the other's dream. Now there would be one dream. All right. So that last part there, that's kind of a little bit of the story part, a little fun part. It's not absolutely necessary here in this context, the last sentence here.
Mm-hmm.
But this point about new dreams required tender care and that
Mm-hmm.
the dream was transitioning. So there was the dream of the self wisdom, and now it's transitioning into something else. And this was something else. So, and again, it was a communion here and collaboration. So, I
Right.
left that sentence in, well, because it's in the story and I didn't want to edit it, but also it is about collaboration to understand
Mm-hmm.
that, hey, we are now on a joint task. Much like when we are in Way of Impeccability, we are sharing a dream, right?
Right.
This dream of being living in a way that we can be fully connected, having
Mm-hmm.
independence of being, freedom, all of this. Okay. The young man continued earnestly, unless I am conceited, and I fear this daily, I cannot ever be sure of my decisions. This is the key point, Unless I am conceited and I fear this daily, I cannot ever be. So he's saying, in a layered way here, yes, of course, if you're conceited, you're going to be sure of your decisions.
Right.
Also saying, and about this point, unless I am conceited, I cannot ever be sure of my decisions. He's even questioning this.
Right. Right.
Yeah, okay. And just the way the language is.
Uh-huh.
So, all right. I know they are flawed or likely to be in the long term. This is my concern, not for the decisions of the year now, but for my life decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say that my decisions are flawed, I know they are flawed. This is not that I know I'm making a mistake. No, I know they are flawed, which is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a crack in the
Sort of
decision, and that
incomplete.
crack, exactly, that
Yeah.
you cannot be certain that they are absolutely correct. It's a guess, it's an estimation, no matter how certain you are. All right. His heart responded, yes. How can we know what is best for us when we cannot conceive of what could be best?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now this in the story, I added this in. This is really the young man saying this, but he's saying it through his heart in the
Mm.
story, right? But in the actuality of the conversation, this was a young man comment here. She watched the young man carefully. His sincerity seemed to make him sad, but it was at the time it was pulled. So
Mm-hmm.
okay. He continued, I am committed to modesty. I am committed to humility. I refuse to fall prey to self-importance. I refuse. And I refuse to be limited by my own decision-making ability. I cannot continue any longer in this way. I have to change. Will you change with me, dear heart? This was a matter they could only undertake together. They would be one heart. So again, this commitment here, this refusal
Mm.
to be delimited by our own decision-making ability. This is a huge philosophical point. So now we are saying that I've come to a conclusion that what I have, the only thing that I have, is not valid.
Mm.
I don't know what the replacement is, but
Right.
it is that point that you made about that we don't have to be positive in a cheerful and happy way.
Mm-hmm.
We simply have to not be negative, whatever form that takes.
Mm-hmm.
So we are saying very definitively, you said there, that my action is to not be something.
Right. Right.
Right. Same here. This is the same point essentially, to say I cannot make my own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go ask anybody else either. So I don't necessarily know what this was entail, but I
Right.
cannot in good conscience just latch onto my decisions and assume them to be valid, no matter how much I believe so. So he's saying I need to change the system here, right?
Right.
So it's just about not doing something that you know to be flawed, regardless of what you know the answer is. She had already changed. Yes, I will. I will embrace a new way of living. We cannot honestly continue in this way. If we are serious about our path, our decisions are limited. She looked at him, open to solution. I have given this much thought, he said somewhat obviously. Yeah, duh. Since we cannot trust any decisions made with limited information, we need access to universal information. I intend to look outside myself for answers. I am too limited. I will look to the universe for answers. The universe has access to universal information. He stopped there. So much was still unsaid. All right. So this looking outside of myself, I put it in the universe here. I will look to the universe for answers. Because in the story too, yes, that is how it came, but I left it in. And because we had already assigned and ascribed this concept of the universe as that which is not us. Now, in the way we talk about the universe, it's much a synonym for God, but I never saw it then as a synonym for God. It was simply that which is the moreness of me, or that which is other than me. Right. So in this concept, yeah, at the time when this was happening and coming about, the original intent of universe here is non-personal, outside of myself,
Right.
just simply and is. It could just well be a computer, right? So it's just what is not me, but the totality of what is not the local me, right? So that is it. Just to say, I'm going to look outside of me. And I think
Right.
as the story goes on a little bit further in the original story, it is the next point comes is to look for input from outside of ourselves. Or
Right.
the young man
Right.
says, I am going to live according to input from outside of myself. That I believe is almost the exact phrasing there, because that's what was happening at the time. We very much said we are going to look from input from outside. Because typically when we come to decisions, we use our internal input. Yes, we take information, but we process it and it comes from internal, we make the decision. To say, no, I am not going to use what comes from inside. I'm going to say, I'm going to use external input only. So it's a big shift. It was a very big shift. I mean, if you read the rest of the story, well, this particular, the gift of intent, it's fairly short. But if you go into the whole full long story, which we might get to at some point, uh, the complications to put it into practice was a
Right.
huge deal. I mean,
Right.
this was not easy. It was very monumental. All right. So attunement is positioning ourselves to be in the best place to most appropriately take advantage of the forces and energies of the world. Attunement is working with life instead of against it, or just randomly being moved by whatever comes our way. It's the difference between surfing life's waves or getting dumped or bowled over with them. I quite like this picture, by the way, because I'm assuming it's a mountain, but it feels like I'm on a wave.
True. Yeah, that's true.
While I'm about it here, let me just do something real quick. Click on that. I just want to give this a background. Yeah,
Sure.
to read it. It's a little bit fuzzy. Not fuzzy, but it could be a little clearer. Well, I don't mean that much background. Thank you very much. I just use the color there, and then I do the opacity. You see, so
Yeah.
a little bit more maybe, so you can kind of still see the background, because it's quite important, that wave. But I need to use a darker color. But let's try that like that. Yeah, it makes it a bit clearer, no?
Yeah.
Okay, we but up. Okay, I don't want to get too stuck in this here. Let the camp come up a bit in there. All right. Now, I just noticed that my eye reads it okay, but on phones and such, where
Right.
people have their brightness set down, it makes a
Right.
difference. So,
Yeah.
all right. So this is again saying what it is a little bit, and you said this part was quite fine, right?
Right. Right.
Okay. As spirit warriors, we take this further, go in all the way. Our aim, since intent is a maximum intent, is to attune to absolutely everything. We insist on attuning to life itself, to spirit, to the universe. This is the ultimate. And if our intent is geared to our life context, we can do no less. All right. So this seems fairly obvious here, except the word attune. Right? You could very well ask our aim, since intent is a maximum intent, since our intent is a maximum intent, right? Right there, We're going all the way. We want the maximum intent. We want maximum awareness. We want maximum
Right.
appropriateness.
Right.
Right? We want maximum goodness. Is to attune to absolutely everything. What does this attune mean as a verb?
Right. Well, and that's, I think for me, that's where, when I was going through this, I thought, okay, the concept in the abstract makes sense, but actual practical application, what does that actually look like? What does
Yes.
attuning really look like? And especially
Yes.
in this particular context of attuning to everything,
Yes.
what does that
Yes.
actually mean? What
Yes.
does that actually look
Yes.
like?
Yes. 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 I want to see if Beena can come back because, Beena, man. Let me see. What I want to tell her. Yeah. Beena. Yes. Yeah. Your sharing on hearing is most appropriate because it is coming to play now with EJ. It's my abbreviation for you,
I like it.
EJ, and attunement because, of course, tuning is hearing the she does try to come back, but sometimes,
Yeah.
she has some flexibility and then she can put things off for later. So just want to make that very important there. All right. So if we think of to attune to the world is to practice capital H hearing with life
Mm-hmm.
itself. It is to hear the world. It is to hear life. But the world more specifically than life.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we think of the world as as something, not just as an inanimate thing, as a
Mm-hmm.
moreness. All right. And whether or not you may think it has a personality or a presence, then Gaia, no, it doesn't matter. If we just say, oh, I want to hear what the world is telling me, whether it be a
Mm-hmm.
computer, an inanimate thing, it doesn't matter. So when we hear what somebody's saying and we are listening past their words, we are listening to the intent,
Right.
we are listening to the abstract, we are listening to meaning, purpose, understanding. We're listening to their emotions, their feelings, their philosophy. We're listening especially to implications and consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is capital H hearing. It is truly listening to and hearing what is implied, what is inferred,
Mm-hmm.
what when you extrapolate from things, you get to that moreness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is hearing. Now, when we hear the world, this is attunement.
Interesting.
At
Okay.
least it's the beginning of attunement, right? It's not quite fully attunement, but it's the start.
Right.
Because then, when we really hear it, now I might hear what somebody's saying. I hear that they have, let's see, I hear their goodness, or I hear their ambition, or whatever it is. I don't necessarily attune to that,
Right.
right? I
True.
mean, I can attune to it in the sense that, well, if I see that their ambition is to be dominant, and I attune in the sense that I don't put myself in a position where I give them any power over me, right?
Right.
So in that sense, I do. But when I hear the world and I understand that the world's intent is, well, universal intent, but we just take the world, yes, makes it simpler, that its intent is an intent for my benefit.
Yeah.
Right. So if I were literally to attune to a person whose intent was completely 100% geared to being of service to me,
Mm-hmm.
in the service in the grand sense that they are going to do, like for instance, if I discovered through hearing that, oh, this person's a literal angel and
Right.
their absolute intent is to assist me to learn and grow and be more, that's all they do, right? How can I not attune to paying attention to whatever it is they're doing? And also, I understand that they can't do it for me. They can't teach me directly because then they're not giving me the opportunity. So when I bring all of this into context, I have to attune to their hints, their suggestions, their clues,
Mm-hmm.
and to be in flow and in harmony with what they are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because they cannot be in a situation and a circumstance and do, if I attune to what they are doing and their intents, then I'm automatically going to be in a good space, because I can't be anything in the wrong space for me. So this is just maximizing the learning and the growing, right?
Yeah,
It is attunement. Thus would be, you could say, a harmonizing of intent.
I like that. Yeah.
Yes, that is a very nice quote. Okay, and I think on that I will add it as a quote at the end of the thing. Maybe I should actually even put it in the thing here somewhere.
I like it.
Let's actually go back to where we were. And since, where were we? Oh, did I go that far so quickly? It was right here. For survival, yeah. For survival, being attuned to the jungle is important. So I'm going to just make a slide here, and I'll come and change it later. Take that out, take that out, take that out. And we said attuning, not attunement, right? Attuning is the harmony of our intent with that of, I said of another, right?
You originally said that it is the harmonizing of intent.
Oh, that's what I said. It is the harmonizing of intent. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. I thought I used the word harmony, but harmonizing. Yes, that's much better. It is the harmonizing of intent. That's it. That's much simpler, and that's much more potent. So harmonizing. Oh, my spell check is English. Very good spell checker. Very good. Okay. There we go. Okay, and let's put this in as a quote. And you know what? I think for once I shall attribute the quote. Shall
There
attribute
you
it.
go. Good.
There you go. It's definitely a young man quote, that, right? I like that it spells Tim. If you don't know, it stands for the young man. It's kind of fun. Oh, Tim. How come Tim spells his name in all caps? I don't know, but okay. So yeah, one more thing. So this is a very, very potent key point here. So why I don't like to italicize the quotes, I don't know, but I don't. So when I italicize, I do it inside the quotation marks. I don't
Right.
like,
That makes
I don't
sense.
know. I don't know why I do, but I guess somewhere along the line it changes them and they look funny or something. So yeah, that's huge. Tuning is the harmonizing of intent. Yeah, yeah. And then that's a big point. That's a very, very cool thing here. So I like this a lot. I like this a lot.
And it's interesting because to me, that, I feel like now all I see is through the lens of trust.
Yes.
And to me, that goes exactly with my new definition of trust from yesterday, of sort of mutually committing to
Yes. Yes.
aligning and attuning to a
Yes.
shared intent, that
Yes.
harmonizing of intent is also trust.
Yes. Yes. Now
So
would you?
attunement, and
Yeah.
that makes sense to me, because attunement sort of implies trust. You're not going to
Correct.
attune to something if you don't
Correct.
trust it.
Correct. Now would you say that you have, through intent being your lens, your focal point, your white hole, that you have come to see that you have set an intent to trust.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
don't just have an intent to goodness, but the application of your intent to goodness comes via your intent to trust.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
So So since you're, hey, what about that picture? Oh, it's not loading. Anyway, so, oh, that's not what I want either. What's going on here? It's very weird here. See, it just disappears. Oh, I know what's wrong. I know what's wrong.
Behind the other one?
It is behind us. Yes, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Because this has a background and another background,
Mm.
so kind of a double background. So, all right, there we go. All right. So, what I want to say is, so you have this profound intent to trust. So for you, attuning is the harmonizing of your trust.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So when you are harmonizing your trust, you're saying, you know what? There's kind of a trust from the universe as well, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
you are harmonizing yours, and you are harmonizing your trust to trust the universe.
Right.
That the universe is in some way doing things which are advantageous, beneficial, useful, good, sensible for you.
Right.
And this is a very profound trust, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So to harmonize your trust with that of the trust of the universe in you, it's a big deal.
Yeah. It's true.
Or to say it in another way, with the trust of yourself as the universe in yourself as the local.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you are trusting future self, as it were.
Right.
Or divine
That was
self,
one of the
higher
things.
self.
Yeah. That was one of the things I was talking to Mom about yesterday, that seeing trust sort of through intent, that it certainly makes sense from the perspective of the universe, that if you are trusting that the universe has a general intent to goodness and an intent for you, an intent to help you, that
Assist you.
to assist you, that you're this mutual commitment between you and the universe to this shared intent is trust. But the same thing can be said with self-trust when it comes to intent, when you look at it through the analogy of what we were talking about yesterday, of what if a prior self, prior to this life, if there was a you before coming into this life, set an intent for you in this life, that you are trusting that past you set an intent that is beneficial to you. The past you put you in a position to learn something useful, and you're trusting that current you is attuning to that intent and staying on track, and you're trusting that future you is going to continue to do the same thing.
Yes. And that is that harmonizing we're talking about, right?
Right.
So to get back to, I think here, the last paragraph, for survival, being attuned to the rhythms, patterns, energies, and workings of the jungle is imperative. Just as in our work or business, it's most advantageous to be attuned to the economy and politics and so on. So this is what we're talking about, capital H, hearing. Attuning is hearing those rhythms, hearing those patterns. It is paying attention with an abstract mind.
Right.
Because that's a pattern, a rhythm in the greater sense. It's an abstract thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
So attuning is paying attention or hearing with our abstract mind. And capital H, hearing, is actually listening with that abstract mind. Same thing, right? You're listening to the greater moreness, not just details. Okay. This is very important. This is very important in attuning.
It is, because this is, to me, this is such a, it really is a very abstract concept, and it's not something that's easy to wrap your mind around from an application perspective. So it's
it
really,
is, yes.
it's really good to dig into it and,
Yes, it's
you know,
essential. It's
through
essential.
to the end, because, and I think this is, to me, a concept that can be different for every person. The actual application of it can look different for every individual. It just
Yeah.
kind of depends on how it makes the most sense to each person.
Yes, yes. And that's why I said that, you know, if you, and why I encourage you to look for the intent of the
Mhm.
sessions. Because in this, I feel that you came to it, you didn't say it specifically, but you're asking to go over it, is that you sense the intent is to go into it in more detail.
Right,
And
right.
absolutely, you know, I mean, I have tons of articles and posts and stuff on attunement
Hmm.
and anomalies and listening to it. This is a fraction of what's out there now.
Yeah.
Some of those posts I made into sessions, you know, but in this case not. I didn't bring it in because I wanted it to be pertinent and relevant, to be
Hmm.
particular, because it needs this particular relevance to it. So it's very important. So yeah, attunement is, it is probably the most abstract of abstract conceptions there is.
Hmm.
Everything about it is abstract, and yet also it is intensely particular.
Right.
Right. But without the abstract connectivity to that particular, it's totally useless. You know, Sherry keeps on saying, yeah, but it's all this abstract stuff, I want to learn, I want to know how to use it. I said, that is the point. It is
Right.
to learn to use the abstract. Everything is about application, but we need to learn to use the abstract in application.
Yeah.
Because if we just learn particulars, we just learn each moment, each instance. We never see the
Right.
commonality,
And
and we
it's
can't transfer it.
and it's just, to me, it's just a behavior at that point. It's
Exactly.
not real application.
Exactly.
It's just a repeated behavior.
Exactly. It's an expression of behavior in the now, not as an innate function and capability of
Right.
the whole self. Right.
Right. Right.
So if I'm doing something because I've learned it in particular, big whoop.
Right.
I'm doing something because I've learned how to apply myself, how to figure
Mhm.
out, how to think, how to adjust,
Yeah.
how to be flexible, fluid, adaptable, etc.,
Yeah.
and how to be appropriate. Thus, now I've acquired something.
Right. Right.
Right. Right. So
This
this
is
is
interesting.
huge.
This is making me think that the questions that I was thinking about from yesterday's session in terms of intent is really a form of attunement, because I kept thinking
Yes.
about, if you were to
Yes.
look at life events that have been really meaningful, or, like from a past perspective, look at things that have happened. And then in the future, as it's happening, really ask yourself, what is the intent of this? The
Yes.
intent behind this event, not necessarily, what were the particulars, what, picking apart all of the details, but what was the intent? And I kept thinking, especially with past events, um, if you think about it through the analogy of past me prior to this life, set an intent for me, had an intent for me to master something, to learn something. So if I put myself in that me's shoes and try to understand what was past me, what was the intent of past me here? What was the deeper meaning of what I was supposed to be learning in this? That's really attunement. That is an exercise of attunement.
Yep. And trust, because you are trusting there was an
Right,
intent, and
right,
there was a benign intent too.
right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when we say intent, we just take it for granted that it's benign intent, but really, that's a massive trust. That we trust that the whole world makes sense,
Right. Yeah,
the
absolutely.
whole universe, everything, and this is Venus' magical point that she's bringing in so
Mm-hmm.
profoundly, to
With humor.
insist that things make sense and to operate from that perspective. It enables us to hear what we otherwise would not hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Ah,
That's a good quote.
yes. Oh, read it back to me. I do like that. I like it.
Sure.
Or copy and paste it into chat, and I can just put it in my quote file.
Okay, so you said to insist that things make sense enables us to hear things that otherwise would not make sense.
Wow. Okay. I do like the quote, but I will clean it up a little bit. Too many things in there, but all right, just paste it in. I'll clean it up later. Oh, oh, I'm typing to Beena here. Oh, no, I was typing in thing earlier. Did I type in Messenger? Because if I typed in Zoom chat, she won't see me. You know what I mean? Because she's not here, so she won't see it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did type. I did send a message in Zoom chat, which she won't see
Yeah.
because she's not here. So
Insist that things make sense enables us to hear things that otherwise we would not, maybe.
yes, yeah. I'll just when I put it in here, it'll come. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Okay, yeah. It just my writer side says, well, you can't have a quote that says things and things, and it's like, come on,
Right.
to insist. Well, first of all, we say that, but I never write that.
Right.
You always can take it out. Insist things make sense. Enables us to hear what? I can just change this all to what? To
We would
hear
not.
what otherwise would not make sense. There's it. There you go. To insist things make sense enables us to hear what otherwise would not make sense. Right?
Yeah.
That's complete as it is. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Let's go back here. Get out of this. Ah, man. I was just so loving what Beena was sharing. It's like, man, so huge, so huge.
Yes.
So huge. Come back, Beena. I want to hear more. I want to hear this in the context of attunement. I'm very keen now to hear Beena's perspective on her attunement.
Yeah.
Because Beena's expression is so different to mine. Yes, it's come from the same source, essentially. The hearing, like she said, came from way of impeccability, but it doesn't matter. The
Right.
end result is very different. It's
Right.
why I, again, like to hear your perspectives on trust.
Mm-hmm.
Any of your perspectives, not just on trust. I'm also got to be very careful here. I don't want to pigeonhole you into just trust.
Right.
Yes, it's a lens for you. It's a fulcrum point, and it's a huge deal. But it's not. Trust is simply the connectivity that links you to everything.
Right.
So, but again, I like to hear, because even though it's yours, and it is coming it from this profoundly different angle, which broadens our perspective, and it's a magical thing. It's a magical thing. All right. So, if operating from the profoundness of appropriateness is our root conception, how can we not attune to life itself? We have to, because we want to make sure our actions are appropriate in the immediate, long term, and in the absolute overall of everything. But this first point is, again, asking for facts, not in evidence, if you ask me, right? If operating from the profoundness of appropriateness is our root conception, okay, that finds me. How can we not attune to life itself? That's a jump there, right?
Yeah. True.
Okay. I mean, yes, we kind of know why, but why? Why is this obvious? Why is it implied from the profoundness of appropriateness? You have to really think about this one. This one has a lot of layers to it, right?
It's true.
If operating from the profoundness of appropriateness is our root conception, how can we not attune to life itself? And the reason for that is, well, because in the maximum context of appropriateness, how do we know what is appropriate unless we are attuned to the overall?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Kind of duh, right?
True. And it's also assuming, I mean, there's an assumption there that we are trusting that life is appropriate.
Yes. Hold on to that for me 1 second.
Sure.
How can we be appropriate in all if we aren't connected to it? I won't say attuned yet, connected to it. Yes?
Absolutely.
Why do I do this with connected? Regularly, I do that. Fascinates me. I correct that all the time. This is going to be a problem. anymore.
Mhm.
Well, I won't have enough space to drag it wide, to pull that, to make it into, eliminate the whole sentence.
Right.
All right, so let's see if that adds. Okay, if operating, how can we be appropriate in the overall if we aren't connected? I don't care for the it if we aren't connected to everything. Like to end on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have to. Well, now the have to is the previous sentence, right? So
Right.
I think the sentence must come at the end. Yes.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and just put it right at the end here. Ah, don't like orphan words. There you go. Can't have orphan words, right?
True.
All right. There we go. Mr. A. All right. So now we say we have to because we want to make sure our actions are appropriate in the medium. Okay. How can we be appropriate in the overall if we aren't connected to everything? Hmm. Hmm. Okay. That makes sense, right? We're getting clarity on this now. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. We attune because, like the young man, if we are honest and if we're also humble, we have to acknowledge our decisions are going to be limited in the larger context as they simply do not have access to the information needed. Attunement connects us to access of that universal information and ways to leverage the overall. This again is a statement of essentially trust. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is an ask. Yeah, it is asking you to believe that this is so. Yeah,
Right. Right.
okay. How do we know this is true?
How do we know it's true?
Well, it's basically saying attunement connects us. It's making a statement of fact,
Right. Right.
right? But
Yeah.
how do you know this is true?
We have to trust.
Yeah. Well, also, you have to say, okay, fine. You could say this is way of impeccability's definition of attunement. It's a
Mm-hmm.
definitive statement, right? So I'll say, okay, this is what attunement means. Attunement is connecting us to access of universal information and ways to leverage that. So that it's just the way it's written
Mm-hmm.
is, it's written in a more definitive way. I try to avoid that. It's
Right.
difficult sometimes. Attunement is grand sensibility. It's expanding our awareness to the rhythm, pattern, and flow of life itself so we can be maximally appropriate. Now, maybe I could change this instead of life itself to say the world itself,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know. But I guess the world, life is more than just the world, it's the
Right.
universe. Yeah. So we can be maximally appropriate. All right. So before we get into alignment, yeah, which really is pretty simple and it's not much here. Um, this makes sense now as a practical doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
as a practical doing, you want to listen to the birds.
Right.
You want to listen to the wind. You want to listen to your dog. You want to listen to people and their rhythms and goings. You want to listen to it for the purpose of knowing what it is as a
Mm-hmm.
regular,
Yeah.
as the usual.
Interesting.
Why do we need to know what the usual is?
So that we can differentiate what the
Precisely.
unusual is.
Precisely. It's an obvious question. Good. I'm glad you're starting to hear my obvious questions as obvious questions, because otherwise we get confused. There must be some complicated answer. No, I'm asking a very
Right.
simple, obvious answer. So, city boy going into the jungle, all he's hearing is, okay, where's my iPhone? What's going on? So he doesn't hear when the birds fall quiet. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
even notice it, right? So he doesn't know when the tiger pounces and chomps him, right? Then he didn't get the warning sign, right? So, but of course, somebody who's grown up in the jungle who knows that, oh, the quiet birds is an anomaly, they realize it. He never said, oh, this is pretty quiet here in the jungle.
Right.
It's like, oh, I thought
Right.
the jungle
Yeah.
was, they don't realize it. So we need to start to actually listen to the world in order to be able to hear the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice nuanced one there, right?
Yeah.
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 That applies to people too.
True. Yeah, that's true.
If you pay enough attention, we start to see patterns and we
Mm-hmm.
start to see the more honest we start to see, like Beena was saying, she's paying attention to your emotionality, to your body,
Mm-hmm.
your breathing rhythms, and things like
Right.
this. There's a great book by Piers Anthony, Omnivore, I believe it's called, where the secret agents interrogate people, and whether they say anything or not makes no difference. Just from reading their physiology and their responses, and through implication, they get the information that they want. It's very cool. So yeah, they practice capital H hearing for sure.
Mhm.
Very cool. Um, but yeah, so this is important to pay attention to the rhythms of the world, to see
Yeah.
what's anomalous and what's out of pattern.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So alignment is once we position ourselves for attunement, we actually make specific uses of life forces and energies. We actually catch the waves of life we've positioned ourselves to be in place to catch. Attunement is being aware of what's out there. Alignment is actually taking action to use what's available. Alignment is application, that because of course without application it's all meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, so we have to understand when we talk about attunement, it is the overall category
Right.
of which alignment and anomalies are subsections.
Right.
But
Right.
nonetheless, it's also a specific thing. So we could actually break down attunement and then put underneath it, we've got attuning, alignment, and anomalies,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So to practice attunement, we need to apply attuning.
Right.
Yes? Okay.
True.
It's a nice differentiation. Anomalies or just that, it's anomalous. We can skip on anomalies right now,
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay. So anomalies are those clues
Mm-hmm.
for us that really, when we don't get it now, um, in terms of the greater attunement, I just want to get to the end of this. Okay, acting without agenda. That's important. But when we are looking at attunement in the overall, if we are attuned, we don't need anomalies necessarily. Just a break in
Mm-hmm.
the pattern will be enough, right?
True. Yeah.
If I'm in the jungle and the birds fall quiet, it's not anomalous,
Right.
right?
Right.
I'm not seeing, a bird fly upside down, for instance. Okay, oh, that's unusual. What's going on here now?
Right.
So anomalies come about when ordinary means of attunement are not enough.
I like
Yeah,
that. I
yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Anomalies are necessary when resolution lies outside the boundaries of the known, our known.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is important. When ordinary means are not sufficient. So we cannot get to it in the usual ways, and we get stuck. And the universe says, I got to help you out here.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't possibly, no matter how impeccable, how thorough you are, you cannot possibly get to what you need because it's outside of the boundaries of your known self.
Yeah.
And the unknown is a big place, you know. It's like you're in space and I need to go. Let's say we get, Q comes and he transports us into some unknown spot in space.
Right.
And we now need to find our way back. And we have all the star charts are completely unknown to us. So
Mm-hmm.
we have no point of reference. Which direction do you go to? Right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you take the specific direction you need to get out to get back to where you were,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of a zillion
Right.
options.
Right.
This is where you need to rely on anomaly to show you
Yeah.
the way, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just taking a gamble. You just it's a matter of luck. And
Right.
that
Right.
in the case of the unknown, to know which way to go to explore to get to the known that you specifically need,
Mm-hmm.
this is a very minute fraction of the unknown, right? So we need very specific mechanism to tune us in that direction. Right.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
That makes
very
sense.
interesting. It's very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Since we know acting without agenda, since we know we are limited, don't know everything, and are nincompoops in relation to the universe, our profound humility and self-honesty forces us to be aware of our personal motivations, forces us to be aware our personal motivations and agendas are limited. That's huge. To
Mm-hmm.
realize our personal motivations and agendas are limited.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, yes, we have an intent, we could say. Our intent is to get what's best for us. But our motivations and agendas, those are limited, right? So
Right.
how, because we don't know, they're based on limited information. So we do the only thing we can do. We don't have any. And switch to attuning and aligning to universal agenda. Personal agendas, agenda is different to personal intent. So when we say agenda here, it is things like ambition and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
success and fame and
Right.
money and,
Right.
you know, family and all of the stuff. You know, okay, not all agendas are negative necessarily, you know, but uh, 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 just there's an implication or corrupt even. But agenda tends to be typically somewhat limited in this case. But even so, even if you are positive, and this is what Beena was saying, that
Mm-hmm.
in order to have capital H hearing, we have to set aside personal agenda
Right. Right.
completely and utterly. We won't be able to hear somebody else if we have personal, and that's what you were saying,
Right.
that you have to
Yeah.
set aside your personal agendas.
I mean, to me, again, that is an application of trust. It's
Yes,
trusting that
yes,
there's more to be gained from attuning to
correct,
the
correct.
overall intent than there is to
Yeah,
personal agenda.
yes, exactly. It's a huge trust. Now, the reason that the young man could trust is because he came to the profound conclusion as to what he could not trust.
Mm-hmm. True.
This, I like that. I thought, this will resonate with Erica Jayne.
Yeah. Yeah.
Attunement is a profound application of insisting that we cannot trust the limitations of our personal self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
It's Joe. Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. Where you going with that gun in your hand? Okay, doesn't quite have a gun in his hand, but all right.
Who's laughing back there?
Hello, hello, Joe. Hello, hello, hello. I like that song. It's a very different song.
Yeah, that, yeah.
It's huge. It's huge. When we
It's,
look at it in the context of what we cannot trust,
right.
impeccably, what I cannot trust.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot absolutely, I have to have self trust. But when it comes to profound life decisions in the longer term, I'm
Right.
sorry. But here, I cannot trust myself,
Mm-hmm.
my little self, my local self.
Right.
So
That's
this is, yeah.
that's one of the things that to me, I think, and it makes sense to me now thinking of it in this context, that when I was thinking yesterday about sort of reverse engineering the intent, the larger intent that we may have set for ourselves,
Mhm.
that a part of that is looking at the real, like, life changing, the things that stick out to you in your mind of things that were really monumental events in your life, that if you're looking for the moreness in those, that
Yes.
helps you see the pattern, because it's in those massive life-changing events where we have potentially unknowingly employed a ton of trust in, you know, the overall intent of the universe. That's where we see attunement really come into play.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
yeah,
All right.
it
So
gives you
there
that-
is a, do you have to go?
I will, yes, I have an
Okay.
appointment here coming up.
Okay. Okay. Uh, all right. So I have what you just talked about. If I fully heard you, is force of circumstance.
Yeah.
And I have an article which will be part of Mourners, but we can go into it in this detail on because I never quite finished it. You know, this search is so weird. You know, okay, it gives me all the things, but you know, and it's called force of circumstance, and yet you think it would come up. It's like, man, how do I have 600 results for
Right.
151? The force of circumstance is coming into it. I don't know. But this force of circumstance is a very, very big deal
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to um, attunement. Because so often that is the issue. All right, take you and leaving your job.
Mm-hmm.
Really, if you look back at it in the context of simply this conception of force of circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
how did your circumstances not force you to leave that job?
Right. Right. Yeah.
I mean, everything was pressing on you. All you
Absolutely.
had to do was unhook from personal agenda,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Once you unhooked from personal agenda, it's like duh, 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 duh. It's like, come on, okay, my head is sore from all these smacks. I get it now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Isn't that something?
It is. It's true.
Wow, I don't know where this force of circumstance is now. Okay, it's a cool post. I know I haven't posted it yet because it's not finished, so we can actually finish it. So, but anyway, I'll find it, and we don't have time now anyway, so we can do this tomorrow.
Awesome.
Let's just finish this one real quick here. Okay, so we said and switch to attuning and aligning to universal agenda.
Mm-hmm.
This switch is also the switch to a deep and profound joy, because how can universal agenda not be magical, awesome, incredible, be more, always more? How can universal agenda not be right? It
Mm-hmm.
has to be. Again, this is facts, not in evidence. And yes, Beena and I were just talking about this yesterday too. Or was it somebody we talked about it? Or maybe we did it in the workshop. Anyway, if you said intent, the whole universe is intent. How can that intent not be an intent to goodness? If it was an intent to badness, it would implode
Right.
eventually,
Right.
right?
Yeah, we did talk
Oh, we
about that.
spoke about this.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
so we again, I'm not asking you to believe this necessarily, because I don't like to be just, but if you think about it, it
Right.
has to be. So
Right.
yes, I'm condensing because also there's a deeper intent to this particular session. Here I am asking the participant to put together things, and I'm assuming they've already acquired all of what came before,
Right.
so I can skip. I don't need to
Mm.
delineate precisely each and everything, right? So yeah, it is up to you to make that extra effort of putting it together.
Right.
So it's kind of like a little almost like a test sort of a thing. Or at least in its assumption of your abilities. If you really don't get this, then you haven't gotten the rest of it, and we need to go
Right.
back again.
Right.
So
Right.
there's a layeredness to things. All right. So yeah, initially we need some suspension of belief temporarily. We need to accept without accepting and trust without trusting that such is the case.
Mm-hmm.
And here again, too, I don't know, sometimes I just fascinate myself, truly. I don't mean to sound egotistical, but it just comes, there's an attunement and the rightness.
Mm-hmm.
This exact paragraph is precisely what I was saying in the previous
Right.
one. That
Right.
okay, if you didn't quite get it, that you need to trust without try, accept and to put it together. Well, yeah, it's telling you that okay, it's telling you in a bigger context, but you need to apply it to the previous paragraph. We do this and go out into the world and simply test this massive idea. So right there, this testing, it's a don't take my word for it. Go and
Yep.
test it.
Yep.
Go and test it. This is important. Soon enough, we'll experience that awesome. And this is a huge point. On this one thing, everything else in way of impeccability is pretty self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
Impeccability, when you understand, it's like duh, right? Self-proving, duh. The dictionary of power, a transformative self-conception. All of these are pretty duh when you really get into it.
Right.
But this idea, this you have to go and just prove for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you do, you'll see, wow, okay. So okay, this is the tasks. So attunement or a core power triangle. There's much to this understanding. Living in attunement is our aim as a spirit warrior. Look carefully at how you would use this, what it means to you personally, and then we'll look at how to customize this profound understanding and life perspective to you as an individual in the takeaway session. So I'm saying it here,
Right.
that we are going to customize this to you.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and that's what you did. You came and you said, okay, let's go over it again so we can
Right.
customize it here. Right? Our abilities are not a limitation when encountering the ineffable. Only our impeccability to ride the moment counts. That's pretty huge,
That is. Yeah.
right? I mean, so your abilities as Erica Jayne, they're not a limitation in
Mm-hmm.
encountering the ineffable. The only things that counts is our impeccability to ride the moment,
Mm-hmm.
because this is about trust.
Right.
This is about trust. If the universe is bringing the ineffable to you and
Mm-hmm.
you are being asked to ride that moment, how can you not trust that this is appropriate and
Right.
sensible? Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. I actually have a literal story about this out in the desert with a white
Mm.
horse that came out of
Wow.
nowhere. Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a literal riding the moment. So
Yeah.
this horse comes. You've dealt with horses, you know horses? Okay. This horse is prancing. We're out in the desert, right? The nearest habitation is the neighbors 5 miles away. As far as I know, they
Right.
didn't have horses, but 5 miles of open desert with nothing in between. This is a long way for a horse to come on its own,
Right.
even if it's lost. Furthermore, it's in the heat of the day. That desert was never cool. I don't care what. And we were there in, late spring, summer. So it was hot. It was always, I couldn't go out. I would just get burnt after, I don't know, 10
Right.
minutes in the sun. It was ridiculously hot. But here this horse comes, right? And it's fresh. It's prancing, but
Mm.
not in a show-offy prance. It's an energized power gait. I don't know
Wow.
if you've ever seen that in a
Yeah.
horse.
Yeah.
And the tail is not all the way up, but three-quarter way up.
Mhm.
You know, when the tail is always up, it's when they're scared and alert. No,
Right.
this is
Right.
a tail that's three-quarter ways up. Furthermore, this horse has got this, and it's looking. It is actively looking. Now, horses don't often look at things specifically with an
Right.
interest. They will look at something if it catches their attention. But you don't see a horse looking around like a person
Right.
does.
Right.
Right? Never. You don't see it. And I worked on horse farms, right? So I mean, on stud farms, right? So we had horses when we were kids too. So I'm very intimately acquainted with horses. Not just when with riding them, but with working with them, you see this behavior of this all the time. You're encountering them kind of, hanging out and whatever. So this horse comes prancing up this little street, not street, I mean the little gravel road that leads
Mhm.
to the thing out. Anyway, so up he comes the hill, and I see him looking. But I'm standing kind of on a corner, and Olivia was off to the side by an old building. But anyway, the horse comes past me. I'm not an issue. Now, a horse that's lost, right? Or a horse that's kind of, just on its own thing, right? And clearly, even a wild horse is not going to approach you like that, first of all.
Right. Right.
And this horse is confident. I mean, this is an attitude. He's looking for something. Or she, I
Mhm.
don't remember if it was he. Now, first of all, it just got, it knows I'm there. It's not that it's oblivious to me, but I'm of no consequence to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right there, it's like, what the hell is
Mhm.
going on here? It's like the horse makes a beeline for Olivia, right
Wow.
to Olivia. So I said to Olivia, "Hey, this horse is for you.
Mm-hmm.
This horse is here for you."
Yeah.
Put Olivia on that horse.
Wow.
Olivia's never ridden a horse in her life. She knows nothing about horses. Exactly. Wow.
That's
Now,
amazing. Yeah.
I'm not stupid. I'm not ignorant. I'm not careless. I'm not thoughtless. I'm not irresponsible. Especially with Olivia, I'm not going to be
Right.
irresponsible. Right?
Right.
I no way in hell am I going to put a newbie who's never been on a horse on a strange foreign horse. I have no clue out of nowhere. No
Yeah.
bridle, no saddle, no nothing. I put her on the horse, and the horse takes her for a couple of spins around the farm.
Wow.
It was a big extended yard. It
Mhm.
was open, there was a fence, but the fence had a gate open, and that part didn't have a fence. So it was kind of a three-quarter fence. But anyway, so it was probably from the house to the fence 150 yards, something like that. So maybe 200 yards, big circumference. But so it takes her basically in this loop of 150-yard circumference around the house. And next to the farmhouse, there were a couple of thorn trees, so I couldn't see when they went behind exactly, you know. And did this a couple of times, came back, and Lever got off, and off the horn went. Now, I
Wow.
lose my memory a little bit in the detail, because it was such an anomalous occurrence. It
Mhm.
shifted my brain into heightened awareness. So I have to get into that mode. So I don't remember everything. Part of it was, I didn't even remember the incident when I was writing the story. I said, Olivia, is there something that stands out to you in the time there? And she says, oh, yeah, the white horse. Oh, what white horse? I didn't remember it. And then when she said,
Wow.
yes. Yeah, it was amazing. But that was the impeccability to ride the moment is what counts. I mean, the universe was essentially, literally saying to Olivia, trust. And you on this magical ride. Trust,
Right.
trust, trust, trust. So it's a very profound story, a very magical deal. Yeah, yeah. Very big deal.
That is
So
really
again,
good.
it's a huge deal, you know, that we get asked that, and in that case, there was this literal asking. The
Right.
universe
Right.
sets it all up, and I get to choose by being aware.
Mm-hmm.
I like that quote there
I
from
do
Sue.
too. It's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I don't know why I said Sue Anu in this one rather than Sue unedited. So,
Yeah.
but this quote, you know, in terms of attunement, that impeccability to ride the moment. This
Mm-hmm.
is truly what impeccability is all about.
Right.
We get asked to ride a moment, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. That's what counts. I mean, if you think too of all of the pressure you had in terms of attunement in leaving your job, you
Right.
know, that force of circumstance kept pressing you, but when you
Right.
you finally did it, what an incredible thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
but now look at what you learned from that. It enabled you to come and do this program
Mhm.
with that same thing. When we set it up this time, and I said, come back, let's do it thoroughly, properly,
Right.
fully, as intended. You took that moment to ride the moment, and you've been
Mm-hmm.
riding it ever since.
Mm.
Yes, you've been
Yeah.
riding it impeccably.
Absolutely.
And look at what's resulted from your decision right when I said that, and you said, yes, let's do this
Mm-hmm.
as intended. That impeccability to ride the moment. Look at the dividends that it's paying.
True. Absolutely.
Incredible. Hmm? Incredible,
Absolutely.
incredible. So this is really, you know, attuning is being thoroughly connected
Mm-hmm.
to the fullness of everything.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is what you are doing in the program. You are fully attuned to the program. Yes.
Absolutely.
And by extension, if you simply now live your life in the same way as you're doing the program,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
life is easy after that, right? I mean, now, if you want to understand attunement, simply look at it in the context of your attunement to way of impeccability, the
Mm-hmm.
program, and say, oh, well, just do that with life. Same
Right.
thing, same way, do life the same way.
Absolutely.
Do life like you did the program, and you'll be living in attunement.
Absolutely. Makes sense.
Does that make sense of it all now?
It does.
All right, we'll do
It
force of
certainly does.
circumstance tomorrow. Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
looking forward
yeah,
to it.
yeah. I would say, you know, normally you go on to the next session, which you can do because it's just a moment to moment
Right.
doings. It's a
Right.
very simple thing. It's a very, very simple. It's just a confirmation. Now, there might be more in it. I don't remember what the task is. But if it is too much, we can leave it for next week. It's not a problem.
Right. Right.
Because I was going to say, what I'm sort of also keen for you to do is to take session 1 and 2 and
Mm-hmm.
merge them.
Right.
and
Yeah.
and we come back because I want to find
Right.
the article on force of circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
but also to get a takeaway re-evaluation because you said you're still working on session one.
Yeah, it's there's so much decompression going on from
Exactly,
just this
exactly,
part of
exactly,
modulation for sure.
exactly. So I would say take attunement and simply say, you know what, attunement's actually pretty simple because it really is. Yes, but it's actually pretty
Right.
simple. And then take like we said now, the same way as you've been in tuning to wave impeccability. Okay, I'm going to do that with life. Life is easy.
Right.
Now
Right.
take that same attunement and attune it to back to session one
Mm-hmm.
and bring all of that into, because session
Right.
one, there's a moreness there, and I want to hear that moreness in the context of attunement being
Mhm.
an accepted obviousness.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Like
you know what
that.
I mean. And then it's like, okay, then that moreness of session one is going to come into
Mm-hmm.
play. Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool, very cool.
I
So there
like it.
was no task for this one really.
Not really. Yeah.
The task was to come and bring it to
Right.
what you did, you know. So yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Awesome.
very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Um, Also, if you have any suggestions on moreness to do to the session,
Hmm.
I'm happy to hear,
Okay.
because I know it's incomplete, but I feel completeness might be counterproductive.
I understand that. Yeah, that makes sense. That
Yeah,
definitely makes
yeah.
sense.
And it's difficult. It's very difficult to
Yes.
live with deliberate incompleteness,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So, and the picture is Erica Jayne attuning.
Ah, I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Awesome. Yeah, this was
magical.
really, really helpful.
All right, good, 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 good. Yeah, it's important. It's important for things
Yeah,
like this to be really
absolutely.
helpful. And now that what you think of it is, again, like everything else, you look at your impeccability, it was always there. Your
Right.
ability to attune was
Right.
always
Right. Right. It's true.
It's so simple that it's so kind of, it's so close we don't see it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Very magical. Very magical.
Love it.
Very magical. Yes, yes. Absolutely love it. Brilliant. Brilliant. All right. Well, we'll see you tomorrow because you got to go,
Oh,
right?
I do. I've got to run. I've got to get
Oh,
lunch before my appointment. So
yes, 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 yes. Give Joe a hug.
I will.
Love Joe. Love Joe. All
Me
right.
too.
All right. See you. Yes, good, good. Like I never heard you say that before. I
Oh,
never
of
heard
course.
you that way before. I know, but not the way it came out like that. That I could really hear it there. It's very nice. All right.
Absolutely.
Bye bye,
All right.
Erica. All right.
Thank
See you
you. I'll
tomorrow.
talk to you
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Bye bye. All right. And meeting for all.